All right. We're going to go ahead and get started. So thanks everyone for staying after the BIM forum and talking about some real world practical innovation around these dumb PDF drawings, right? I think, I love going to BIM forum because you get to see cool examples of really what is possible, and we have these conversations like, man, if only we could do this and only do that, we'd be so great. And yet we always come down to it. I don't know if you guys were in the room when I think it was David was talking about how until we solve contracts, until we solve the more basic stuff around collaboration, none of this stuff's going to happen. And it's not going to work. And so what I want to do today in the next hour is, as brief as I can, thanks, Chris. It won't be that brief. Go through the history since 2013 of the Construction PDF Coalition, sort of what was our formation, why did we start, but also where has that evolved and where do we hope to see it going, and then really have a discussion with those who are here to see sort of why you're here and how we can work together moving forward in partnership with BIM Forum, Autodesk, and a bunch of others. So, whoops, that is a plug. Let me plug this in real quick, see if we can get going. But I will go ahead and start. I'm going to start with the mission and the purpose, which, interestingly enough, there has been quite an evolution of the Construction PDF Coalition, but the vision and mission really has not changed, surprisingly, which is to maximize the quality and efficiency of digital handoffs through collaborative guidelines and adapting an open source approach. So very much the same way that Building Smart supports IFC and Open BIM, we're saying, hey guys, if you didn't notice, in 2008, PDF became an ISO open source standard. We can do a lot of stuff with it, and reality is in the US, more owners and GC, just your commonplace folks, will have a free or paid PDF viewer, and most likely do not have a free or paid IFC viewer. So just sort of dealing with reality, trying to get more adoption, more democratization of digital information for design and construction projects. And so you can see that. I'll go ahead and keep going. That's not working. I'll just skip ahead. The story itself. Starting back in 2013, Kyle Hughes, who's with Skanska currently as a project manager, was almost sort of venting a little bit to Sasha Reed, who's with Bluebeam, about what is it with the different projects that I get that you get different sets of drawings. They don't work the same way in Bluebeam. He's almost blaming Bluebeam, and we're all realizing like, well, it's not really a Bluebeam problem. That's a PDF problem. That's a how is this drawing created in the first place. And Kyle very quickly realized that his problem was not his only problem. It was a shared problem across quite a few folks, and brought together about 10 to 12 general contractors only the first year, but realized very quickly that the problem wasn't with general contractor. We had to open that discussion up, bring in designers and engineers, those who are creating documents, and have really an open discussion. So the next year, we each sort of were assigned to bring in one architect and one engineer that we knew that was sort of inside the circle, that knew where these broken processes were, and developed the version 1 of the PDF guidelines. That was distributed out. We sort of built a website, bootstrapped it. A lot of great folks, Alan included, was sort of part of that early group. And it's evolved over the last couple of years and really gained traction and gained momentum, just frankly because more people are becoming realized that this is part of the problem. As more adopt digital, they're all facing this dilemma that just because it's digital doesn't mean it's going to be automated and efficient and perfect in the same way that all the technology guys are selling to us. So I don't talk the entire time, I'm going to try and play this video here that talks from some other folks on the group.
In this business, it's all about the contract. And what we are trying to do as a group, as a united front, is to enhance that contract and have everyone on the same page to make a better project.
This is a great opportunity to get together with a group of contractors and design firms to lock arms and make a difference in the industry.
It's really important that we come together as architects, designers, and owners and try and get the most out of the documents that we have and how we use them together. The idea of recreating work and using multiple documents and each having them set up a different way doesn't really bode for a very lean process.
What are the architectural challenges that we face with some of the proposed standards and how we produce PDFs? The concept is brilliant, and we're all excited to do it because ultimately it makes our deliverable, which is something the contractor can use to build a project, it makes it more advantageous for them.
There is a lot of inconsistency across the industry and a need for more efficiency, a better way to share.
And even outside of just general contractors, it's an issue for the owners at the end of the job and even the design firms at the beginning. there's a lot of efficiencies that we can gain out of improving just consistency across the way PDFs are created.
I think it's important that we also look towards constructability and how we can construct the buildings that we're designing better, serve our clients better, and work more collaboratively.
This will allow us to take information from native programs and create PDF documents for construction. This eliminates multiple steps in the process, but more importantly, the information will flow seamlessly, so in construction we'll have the information do our job better. I'm looking forward to using this guideline in our projects for design and construction.
Awesome. And so the website is CPCOALITION.com, in case I didn't mention that before. I'm going to skip through a couple of these real quick. These are just some examples of sort of my personal story of using BIM on site and sort of how the ideal of going from 3D models to 2D drawings and that seamless workflow, and really the efficiency that we were able to drive at DPR Construction through our concrete group of direct export from BIM to 2D to out in the field, because that was the information that they needed and nothing more. And even, you know, I would love to see this world where we live in a completely BIM world, and we got very close to that. We were doing some very, very detailed rebar and steel coordination that could only be done in 3D. But I think the reality is that those are sort of more rare cases and the exceptions to the rule. Whereas the normal is that we want to live this ideal, and we talk in BIM form a lot about this hypothetical, you know, define the value, sort of do the coordination in the development of the BIM, and then we hit this perfect point where everything's coordinated and we go off and realize it. And, you know, they talk about this in the lean classes and lean theory, and this is not a new topic. And, you know, a lot of my experiences with integrated project delivery and getting rid of these contract issues was to try and do that. But even we faced a lot of those same challenges. And one of the discussions we were having as a leadership team within CP Coalition was someone shared a blog post that was written around AutoCAD 2017, and this sort of preference to want to dumb down files because it's safer from a contract standpoint. And, you know, we sort of, I didn't include some of our comments. We were like, are you kidding me? And the guy Nigel's, who's a BIM consultant in UK, just ripped him a new one, which is awesome. But then he replies back to us and he's like, I'm pleased this has generated such a discussion. And he makes a very good point that there are a lot of situations where it's in their best interest to shut this stuff down. And part of our discussions was actually we can have the opposite problem sometime, that you do have a city that decided to do digital signatures, yet they lock everything down in the security settings, so you can't even add a markup to it. And they don't realize what they're doing. They're just getting sold on, oh, it's secure. Okay, yeah, I want that. So how can we as a CP Coalition bring that conversation higher up and make sure those conversations are being had? Most everyone here with BIM forms can be familiar of just the 3D to the 2D and how a detailer creates their 3D off of it, and they're going to create their 2D drawings, and then, you know, our designer is going to come and conform design intent with those two, you know, off the 2D. At the end of the day, I mean, the point is, obviously, these are different models. We overlay the two of them. We can see where the geometry differences, we can see the coordination issues. You know, we try and compare over 2D drawings, and even the axes are completely flipped. They're not aligned between each other because they never used to have to do that. So why should we? Some other things we found that have been sort of pain points downstream with poor, I won't say poor Revit use, but poor BIM consistency is great ideas of naming conventions where we can use logic of location breakdowns to create some awesome hyperlink efficiencies. But then you got a couple of these off trades that don't follow the architect's naming convention. It's like, guys, let's keep the consistency on the design side. Even things within automation where the architect doesn't even realize that he's actually put two different detail callouts on the same callout. And, you know, that would never happen when we were hand drawing, but sort of the detriment of automation has created some headaches. There's a lot of opportunities with just the metadata behind files that oftentimes we don't see. Bookmarks and sheet names and things that we can change inside Revit to really optimize downstream workflows, but we're not having those conversations. And then just general alignment across versions and disciplines. Like, we should be able to have all disciplines, all floors on the same coordinated grid line so that whatever you want to turn on and off, you can turn on and off. But, you know, there's some great apps that could really take advantage of that even more so that's outside of the PDF file. The fact of the matter is we're not setting up this stuff in the first place in the authoring tools the right way. So that's really where we want to focus our efforts is fixing it at the source. I don't even know why I'm holding this thing. It doesn't work. So the CP Coalition is currently working on 3 different initiatives. The first one, sort of bread and butter where we started from, was the PDF guidelines. You can see we just closed the markups session or the review session of the version 1.0. And we'll be rolling out with a draft of version 2.0 by Autodesk University. And so the scope and overview, I mean, really we're talking about, again, maintaining document integrity, how does it get created, vector alignments, you know, what are some of the other big points that have come up on the guidelines that you deal with, Alan?
Caught me off guard.
Yeah, sorry about that. I'll keep going. But I mean, hatch patterns was, you know, an interesting one that's like, wait, why do hatch patterns matter? But you forget that whenever 2 vectors cross, it creates like a huge delay, or it's a graphics issue. And so cross hatch patterns are a huge headache downstream on iPads and other things. But architects are like, but that's the way I've always done it. That's the way it's supposed to look. And we understand that. I you know, it's the whole aesthetic thing. My wife has that. I don't.
Layers, things being on layers.
Yeah, or on layers. And sometimes we really have to ask ourselves, why was it that we did it that original way? And really think, how is the digital world disrupting the traditional process that we've sort of just copied into the electronic world and not really transformed into the digital world? So just some real quick real use cases on the version 1.0. So we've had over 1,700 guideline views on the website. Trying to get folks to use the creator that we're going to talk about in a second. That's a lot more interactive. And then you can see a list here of the different folks that are actively implementing this. And we're, you know, working with different jurisdictions as well as owners to really incorporate their version of these guidelines as part of their standard. Initiative number 2, impact and awareness. Really just trying to, again, this is a grassroots coalition that's trying to gain a voice and be a voice for the industry of what's working, what's not working, where should we focus. You know, we want to listen way more than we talk, which is funny because I do talk a lot. And so we've got some great ways to do it online through Smartsheet. There's an app. And again, anybody, I forgot to mention that if even just on the piece of paper right here, if anybody's not already part of the email list or the LinkedIn group, do put your information down and just make sure we get it at the end of it. I'll make sure I get everybody added to the LinkedIn group as well as the invites. But you'll get links to fill out these ideas, join the LinkedIn group. We're up to almost 350 members now and growing. And an opportunity that we really would like to enhance more is this idea of a guidelines form that sort of says, what if a future BIM execution plan for a project was more of a web portal that didn't tell you exactly how to do it, but asked you the right questions so that as you answer those questions specific to your job, you get down to the best crowdsource. I mean, it's a cool vision, and I know how long that's going to take, but this can be one way that we can start with that, is just seeding this idea of having teams go through a process of filling out their standard collaboratively together online. That's really where I think that communication problem comes together. But ultimately, there is still a technology challenge, and that's going to be at the integration point. And so the initiative number 3 that's we sort of bounce around an idea, what we've been calling it, but it's this idea of a data dictionary or integrated data where we know that everything's not just going to be in BIM. People are going to like to see it, you know, more scheduled Gantt chart view or more as a data dashboard. They just want to see the photos and videos, or mute you, they would want to see it, you know, in 2D drawings. And that information of what is an issue, what is an RFI, can, you know, it has the ability to transfer through APIs, through PDF metadata, through other ways to get from point A to point B. We actually have to build those connections. They're not just going to build themselves. And we need to know from the people who are going to use it exactly what they want so that we can give them what they want and nothing more. So that's going to take some time to do, but part of it's going to start with defining that language, which is going to be, what does the industry want to call it? And then what does technology partners want to call it? Bring everybody to the table and have that conversation. So we sort of addressed the question of, okay, yeah, another standard or another group, like aren't there all these things sort of out there, and where does CP Coalition fit? And I think, at least my stance, if anyone wants to disagree, is that, you know, we're not really here to create new standards. I think what we find is that we have a voice of the industry of people that actually want to call bullshit and put their 2 cents in and influence something that is existing. Let's fix what's there, not try and recreate something new again. And so between a new group that we learned about called Open Permit, which is very much more on the AHJ state and city inspector side, and trying to develop those relationships and get more digital pass-through on the permitting. Building Smart Alliance, Building Smart International, we don't care. We don't pick sides. We just want to make sure everybody's talking to each other, because there are some really interesting things happening on the BSI side or BSA side around crowdsourcing standards from the industry. And we'd love to be able to leverage that, but also leverage it with this new BIM forum, BIM execution plan that's, should be hopefully coming out soon. So we want to really partner between all of them, sort of maybe create our own stamp of approval or something. COSA is another one that, if you're not familiar with, has something called an AGC XML that's supposed to be sort of a starting point to that data dictionary, but it honestly didn't get that much use and adoption. So maybe we can either breathe some life back into it or renew that somehow. So that's an opportunity. And then some folks may have been here earlier in the week for the US IBD and understanding how important laser scanning and this idea of LOA, level of accuracy. It's not today, but I do see definitely a downstream sort of partnership integration of how do we link that into it, of all the as-built and the verifications based on a perfect design. And so I'm so glad Frank's in the room, because I get to give this part of the presentation again while he's here. But so we gave a presentation, actually, Alan and Chris and I, at BIM Forum Orlando last year. And it was really trying to ask the question of what is a BIM deliverable? And can even a 2D PDF be considered a BIM deliverable? And it shook some folks up. I think it may have offended some people in the room, but I think Frank got excited because I think he knew we were onto something. He's a smart man, but I sort of joked that we awoke the giant of Autodesk. And so I'll quickly run through sort of some of the formal discussions that Frank and I have had of developing more of this partnership, knowing that we shouldn't hide from the technology, relationships, and. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Take that picture. But the point being that we do need to have a conduit where we can actually talk about which tools we're using. I agree with the BIM forum stance that it needs to be agnostic, needs to be all these things. But if we're not talking about the tools in a agnostic way, then we're not moving forward. So I'm hoping that CPC can sort of fit in that arm of being that communication between the true technology providers, Autodesk, Bluebeam, Procore, Trimble, any of these guys that are really trying to play in the data and the integration space to help them talk to each other, because they're not incentivized to talk to each other, but we're incentivized for them to talk to each other. And if we're their customers, then that's sort of that's the play, to be transparent. But some of the things that we had talked about, just the alignment with the initiative, the alignment with the mission and our purpose, and just how similar this is really to what Building Smart International is trying to do with the IFC standpoint. And obviously Autodesk has been a huge supporter of IFC, so why not support PDF as well? I think we talked about a lot of the shared pains and how having great folks like Ivan have that deeper understanding of Revit and how to address the process problems inside the tool. I think it's a great platform where we can do that and share those best practices with the industry. And then we did actually get into a discussion, and I will sort of bring up the stigma of PDF and the fact that it is the Construction PDF Coalition. And we've sort of even gone back and forth, because technically the website is cpcoalition.com, which you could say that PDF is progress or other ways of sort of moving forward and being even more agnostic. But in all honesty, I think a lot of the attraction has been the fact that it's been PDF. And it is still a big deal right now. So there's no need to necessarily change it today. There may be a day in the future where a PDF does become obsolete, and that's a perfect opportunity. Or when we expand outside of the PDF, drop that and sort of move on. I'm sure we'll ratify whatever governance we have to do that. I think as of right now, unless, again, this is grassroots, so hoping to have this as part of the discussion, we'll keep it as Construction PDF Coalition, one of the initiatives being that guidelines. But really the idea, if you go back to that mission and vision, is around digital collaboration and open source collaboration. Let's see, I'm going to keep going here. So we did sort of do some interim voting that we're going to be confirming as we get a lot of this documentation down of sort of this leadership team. And so you'll see Kyle Hughes and Sasha, the two that really started and kicked it all off, are going to kind of become our first two advisor roles. And then myself as chair, Alan Engel as vice chair, and Brianna Halfai with Lend-Lease in LA playing secretary. And then we do have three initiative leads, Jim Gentile, Lend-Lease as well, Chris here, and Lonnie. So this is just a quick graphic, and I may even leave this up for part of our discussion, is how we sort of see the separation between the members and the partners, and really understanding the industry side versus sort of technology and organization side, and who's playing what role, because really we want to be that agnostic collaborator between the architect's bias, the engineer's bias, the contractor's bias, the subcontractor's bias, the owner's bias, probably maybe even the AHJ bias, and knowing that all of them need to come in and put their 2 cents in so that we can sort of filter and come up with some sort of an aggregate balance. And then, it really is a true coalition. And then at the end of the day, we have to work and partner with all of these partners to provide software, to provide the hardware. They're the service providers, the consultants, the implementers, the integrators, and some of the plugin providers, and then the other industry organizations, BIM Forum, Building Smart, all these guys that we want to be partnering with, and again, not competing with, but being complementary to as sort of that industry practitioner review arm and seal of approval for a lot of these standards out there. So, how did I do, Chris? I think I talked pretty fast, but I really want to just get into some discussion topics now, and maybe start with some introductions since we have some great new folks here, and just maybe you want to start with names, sort of the company, the background you come from, your interest, and if any of these are of interest to you and you want to comment on, great. So let's just go ahead and do some introduction. Rick, let's start.
Jeffrey Ouellette, Vectorworks. Work on the product marketing team, specifically the architecture team, and started as an architect, then moved to the dark side, software development. Now I'm even on the darker dark side, which is product marketing of software. But I also represent Vectorworks in a number of industry forums, so AIA, Building Smart, and then at Building Smart, I chair the implementation support group, where all the vendors who support IFC and their products come together and talk about issues of that support, what's working, what's not working. We get information from the technical experts at Building Smart about the standard, about IFC, about BCF, and others. There's about 14 regular members, including a representative from Autodesk and a number of other companies that work not just in the U.S. but worldwide.
Awesome.
Hi, I'm Lillian. I'm with Bluebeam, and I'm a engineering specialist. Before working for Bluebeam, I was a BIM coordinator, so it is definitely something very close and dear to me. So definitely know all the pains, but one of the biggest things I do at Bluebeam is really work with you guys, the members, to find really workflow solutions and take some of your suggestions to do that fast to the product development so we can enhance and make it.
Awesome.
All right, my name is Simon Jarmilo. I work for Autodesk, been with them for about a year. My previous background is with Balfour Beatty Construction. I was regional manager for the Southeast region for virtual design construction. Understand all the pains working with different trades and collaborate with documents. Same as you said, things don't align, so when you try to compare groups with apples, you end up comparing apples to pears. So my interest here with the PC Coalition is try to come up with a new level of collaboration, a new understanding where you actually can grab documents and waste less time trying to align them together.
Awesome. Thanks, Simon. We go back to him.
Oh, Leo Maya, work with Iker. Been with Iker a little over a year. I have about 5 years for a while before I got
Awesome.
I'm Joe Powell, also work with Iker, background in mechanical engineering. Started with Will about 4 years ago. I'm in construction and started doing some project coordination. Project manager out on the coast. I'm a regional development
Nick Tilford with Shuff Steel. New role doing BIM coordination with them. I'm trying to be a trade sub acolyte for standardization practices. It's something that we're growing into. I have a background in structural steel detailing for other decades, and it's more about trying to get my industry on a page that's relevant relative to where general contractors wanting all of the stuff to go as well. And I have trades over these choice and depth rating that I'm trying to push forward as well, and trying to be a bigger part of it.
Well, and what I think is unique about structural steel is you create so much data for yourself
Yes.
that you've never shared, and GCs could get so much value from your data also, but neither side have ever really talked to each other. And it's an interesting discovery the more you sort of open that up. But awesome.
Alex Belkoff, Master Construction Company. Well, currently I'm a virtual construction manager in the Columbus region. I was formerly in operations science and project manager. So I have a lot of vested interest in being in the field in the PDC, just getting cleaner information to our builders and really kind of leverage that with just the overall chaos that deals on a daily basis. So cleaning information up, making sure that they know it's the most current, and just figuring out just a better workflow to keep paper off the job site and try to keep things in that digital format, which is more highly visible for our people. Becoming more technology savvy. So.
Awesome. Go back.
Chuck Meeks with Autodesk. I work on the same team as Ivan. My role is primarily looking at the workflows in the education, healthcare, and retail industries, trying to understand where we can provide opportunity.
Marty Chobottom with Invacara. I come from the FM software world. I was working in FM software for about 9 years. Invacara is a software startup. And right now we're focused on data quality, reliability of the data that's in models. And we're expanding that, our data model, to include other, looking at other formats, data that's in the PDFs, data that might be supplied in other sources, and really aligning all that data and ensuring it's reliable.
Joe.
Joe Williams, Roger Bryan Construction, and kind of a designer turned builder.
It's okay, we'll talk.
Spent the last couple of years jumping into the deep field data image of a PDF. Interesting to hear from
everyone. I'm Paulina. I work in my background is building engineering. In the last year, we focused a lot of I realized that we
Right. Awesome. Paul?
Paul Hishka, Director of BIM all day there. So older construction company, 2 people. Now the NJ Harris, about 150 million self-seeing. There's different data all different. I can make you guys will feel much easier. So there won't be
Is there one answer?
Yeah, just a bunch of different.
Yeah, I think that's the uncomfortable truth is there is no. We all want there to be one answer, but there isn't one. So that's part of the discussion. We missed the last two. We want to go, Josh?
I mean, Josh Cohen, I work in JV Knowledge. I have a lot of public speaking. Always look for new ways and new formats. Always communicate.
My name is Chris Friday. I'm with Avail. We're software providers. That being said, similar but different path to Joe here. I started out as a builder, went to architecture school, practiced architecture for over a decade, joined a very large firm, CGF Architects, and very early on helped develop the BIM strategy for the entire firm. It's a very new technology for them, us at the time. Most of my career has been very focused on collaboration between very large and complex teams on very, very large, complex projects, large healthcare and convention center projects primarily. So I'm very much coming at this from a designer point of view. I see the value, I believe, in what it is that this group is trying to do. I think that could very much help our industry, whatever it is that we're doing, whether we're software providers, contractors, architects, etc. And there's a lot of value. I'm excited to be involved.
Awesome. Chris?
Sure. Chris Langiza, Director of VDC at Styles down in Fort Lauderdale. I'm also the group lead for the data group, so I heard a lot of data talk, so I'm sure Nathan will ask me to expand upon what we're looking at.
Thanks.
Alan Engel, BDC to FM Integration Manager at JLL. I too have had a storied past. I was on the design side for over a decade, went to the construction side for a few years, and now I'm on the owner side. And I act as a liaison in helping owners and educate owners on the VDC process, the data that they can collect, and pushing that data into their IWMS or CMMS system.
Awesome. And I think we do have a few folks online. Cody, you want to introduce yourself if you're able to?
I'm Ruben Stone. I'm with TY Land International. I'm part of the Signature Bridge Design Group and Alternative Delivery people. So basically I deal with design, build, and collaboration, kind of like a scrum master for bridges. Passionate about ensuring that my team has a chance to collaborate or has a collaborative process in place for a higher level of quality control and communication. That's why I'm here.
Thanks, Ruben. Cody, can you hear us?
Yep. Cody Nowak with Martin Brothers. I'm BDC BIM manager over here. Recently more on the side of R&D, in charge of our BIM cave here in Gardena. And we've headed up a few AR proof of concepts as well, specifically with the HoloLens. So we're doing some pretty cool, disruptive, innovative proof of concepts over here in Los Angeles.
Awesome. Thanks, Cody. Yeah, I'm kind of surprised why you're on this call, because aren't you trying to get rid of any drawings altogether and just use augmented reality?
I'm never against anything, man. I'm all over the board. So I'm all about what's happening right now. AR and no construction documentation. That's a thing of the future. So
good answer. Are we missing? Is anyone else on the call that we're missing? Going once, going twice. Awesome. So yeah, I mean, that's.
Can you hear me, Nate?
Yes, go ahead. Hi.
Hi, Brianna Half-Eyed with Lend-Lease.
Awesome. Have you been on the whole time, or did you just get on? Sorry, I know.
Yeah, I've been on the whole time.
Okay, awesome. I've been on the whole time. Cool. So let me move this off so we can see those discussion topics again and see if we want to go anywhere with any of them. I mean, obviously, I think that the data standardization, the question I would ask, even going back to this, one solution, one app, one answer, what's the closest anyone has gotten to the right way to do it? I mean, I know there's got to be some glimmers of success stories of, what was needed to really get that good collaboration. I'm curious if anyone has any stories or things that they've done before that have worked to create those links of integrations between either a designer and a builder or engineer.
co-location.
Co-location.
Big time.
And so when we talk about co-location, is it the fact that they're there in person, or is it the fact that the servers are set up there locally? Is it both? Like what aspects of it?
I've participated in both methods. We're physically working and even partner architecture firms working out of the same model that's hosted. It doesn't matter where it's hosted somewhere. We're all, sketching on the same piece of paper. So that's co-location, one sense of the term. Co-location in the sense of being physically located in the same room where I can walk down the hallway and speak with the mechanical engineer about whatever it is that I'm interested in at that point in time. Cut out so much time and what I would have to call and perceive as waste in the process, having been through that process and now being able to look back and see that.
Well, and I've got to imagine that was a pretty iterative process, because when you're there together, then you can actually change the process more rapidly, right? I mean, like how did that work as far as, are there any examples of like, even pretty technical here, like specific things you came into that you were able to overcome?
Yeah, so I mean, I don't know, they're almost too small to identify.
Mhm.
It was in that iterative process. It was very easy just to shout across the room and get an answer to something that may be a very minor question, even a lack of understanding on my part that I could ask a structural engineer who was sitting 6 feet away from me and get a very quick answer.
Oh, so just a clarification of design questions.
Design questions, or I need to understand why somebody has a requirement that I can't move. As an example, I can't move my shaft penetration for a structural reason. I have my own reasons why it does need to move, and to be able to, in a friendly environment, have an open conversation, talk through those issues, and then decide on a strategy that works for both of us was a very simplified process in that co-location environment.
It's interesting because I think we're seeing that level of understanding on the geometry coordination side of things, of where should things go, because there's such an impact on the downstream geometry and making money and profits, whatever. But now that all this discussion is around data and around collaboration, around all these things that nobody really directly cares about, they sort of indirectly care about, how do you take that same application of, well, just what makes the most sense, but then bring that into an even earlier conversation about what should we name area A, B, or C, or level 1, 2, or 3? And does anyone able to have conversations that early, or what is the earliest that you can have? Yeah, Joe.
We were able to get involved early, rather than just getting a model every week and having to reprocess it every time we got it. We just look at these two data fields in the model. We can do it once, and every time we send it. It's challenging. It takes trust with the when you put my Trojan horse in the model.
Well, and we're actually, to use an analogy we were talking about earlier this week, when we talk about like what makes Uber so different than taxis, of like the whole reaping, when do you reap the rewards and when do you face the pains in the process of like, whether you're a driver or a rider, you get in and go no matter what. It's all the paperwork, all the crap you got to do at the end to get paid or to pay or whatever. It's always a frustration at the end figuring it out. How many of our construction contracts are that way? But with Uber, you have to put your credit card information up front. You have to tell them that you allow their location up front. If you don't do it, you don't get it and you don't use it. And if you're not ready yet, you're not ready yet. And those that are do. But we can't really set up that sort of as long as you put your information up front, you get to play. All we do is write requirements and say, every single person will do this. But I don't think that mentality works. I think we have to think more of the Uber mentality of how do we get people to want to put the information in. And like David said upstairs, that goes back to contracts.
Joe, what kind of data were you guys putting in there that was helping you use?
Yeah, particularly this was during the pre-con phase. Updated model on a regular basis, and I price it, update it. There's a lot of pricing. Essentially, basically our categorization of
So was it the actual data in the fields, or was the fact that the fields were available?
It was both, but rather than having to fill out the field every single time, so we did both. We placed the custom fields in the model and filled them out, and then now they would create new objects, obviously, but then the fields would be there.
Right.
We actually did play with a CSV file. So rather than the model, we just new file, an update, and we just put that in the model. And then we weren't in the model, we weren't in the
And the reason I asked that question is because, when we talk about the data as it relates to PDFs or it relates to models, whatever, I think one of the biggest hurdles we ever come into a lot of times with it is it's not a place for us to put it. We don't all have like the same things that we want to put in the model or the same things we want to put in the PDF. So could we kind of condense that list down? And that's why I'm leading the data dictionary, because I'm a data nerd. So I like big data. And it's basically the idea of, could we get 10 simple fields? I'm glad I got one guy to laugh about my big data. Can we get 10 common fields that would be useful to all of us that we could populate?
Yeah, because you said custom field, and the fact that it is a custom field just sets it up for failure. Right. So how do we define I like common field, not necessarily standard field, like common field that everybody uses.
That we're not going to hit everything, but we know that there are certain things that all of us always are going to need. And if we could come up with that short list and start there and say, okay, and then there might be some best practices that say, hey, well, if you also add these 5, so you can do this and this with this information. I just think of like all the different vendors that deal with taking a drawing and uploading it to a system to collect its sheet name, its title, its size, what kind of document it is. I mean, there's 25 of them that do all the same thing, right? And they all do it in a little bit different way. Some of them OCR, some of them, strip the information out of the data. Some of them do both. But if just the data was there on all those fields on every PDF, it didn't matter what system you were going to use, you get consistent information. You knew it was right because it came right from the authoring platform. And that's one of the things we're trying to do with the data dictionary. We're not trying to kind of rewrite a standard of how we're going to organize data or anything. We're just saying, guys, here's the 10 fields. Autodesk, can you implement these 10 fields in Revit and AutoCAD that they always come out with every PDF? And Vectorworks, can you give us these 10 fields? And ArchiCAD, can you give us these 10 fields? And just say, and some of them are already there as part of the ISO standard, but I think there's a few more that we need.
Yeah, the way we're dealing with, because we did something very similar with what we did for estimating purposes, because when we were running our estimating application, it reads to custom name parameters.
Yep, shared parameters.
Every single design firm does it different.
Yep. Yeah.
And you cannot twist their arm and have them rename every single item that they have to just meet their expectations.
Yeah.
So the way that we did it is we created a file that was the shared parameter file, and we send that file to them, and when they loaded that file, it populated with all the parameters that we needed for our specific purpose. And we used the same thing, but not a CSV file. We actually imported to an actual spreadsheet, and we found different applications that were phenomenal to be able to import that information. Now, with regards to adding those specific parameter fields on Revit, just a quick point here. If you start adding too much information that probably one team is going to be using and the other doesn't, and those fields are empty inside Revit, remember that that's going to have an impact on the file.
Oh, absolutely. And that's why I'm saying we want to keep that list short. We want it to be the ones that need to be filled out. I envision, and maybe I'm overstepping, but I envision you go into Revit and you've got an add-in that says CPCOALITION, and you click this button and it puts these 10 fields in, and then they're required so that when you pop out a drawing, all that stuff comes with your CAD file, it all comes with your PDF, it comes with your model, and
But in reality, the only way you'll ever get that is when you have that web portal where people actually say, this is the way that I've always done it. And you put all that in and you build a translation, and it spits out a file that says, here's your customized file that you load into Revit that now you'll get those fields right. take them out, take the people out of the equation of the integration, and just ask them the questions about what they care about.
Correct. Because if you set up that page where you're actually defining all the standards for your project, and it comes out with a result that would be a shared parameter result that you can actually import to your file, it'd be a lot better than having just the one-click button that will put parameters that you're not going to even be using.
And the thing is, well, and so AGC XML, I have to say, like, that was intended to be this. I think, is it not? I mean, in theory, it could have been. I mean, it just didn't get the adoption.
They suffer from what I've been saying of having too many parameters
Yeah.
that people don't use. They intended it to be, but to be the standard format so that different PM softwares could talk to each other. But what happened is that in order to satisfy all the people involved, it ended up becoming so large.
Just remember that it's like this small ball of snow that if you start rolling it, starts getting bigger. The architect creates parameters that nobody else is going to be using and has it that as a template file. And then it goes to the general contractor, and he gets that file, and he's running additional parameters, and he's running software to be able to extract information. A lot of software applications, they do not discriminate whether or not they pull in those parameters in or not, so the file gets heavier. And if subcontractors doing the same thing, that little ball of snow that was created from the architect starts getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and it gets to a point that you have a file that's a terabyte in size that you can't open it, and it's not because—
That sounds like a Revit problem. No, I mean, you're I mean, that is a byproduct, and so you have to balance those out. I mean, it's always situational. Yeah.
You know, we have the argument with layers with Alan. It's not an argument, it's a conversation with Alan about layers, and he likes layers, and then there's a lot of us that don't like layers because it makes things too complicated.
Are you a tabs or spaces? You know,
tabs or spaces, right? So
depends on your language.
Based off of 2 line 11, and then it just goes right in. But it took a long time to get the architect to do that and do that all the time.
Well, and that's one of
the that's where the issue comes with us.
And that's one of the reasons that we're trying to educate the owners on it, because we realize that they have the ability to say to the architect, "Hey, we need you to do this." Because
But the answer is not do it exactly this way. And part of this is it's not about a standard process. And actually, even thinking of all the different ports, it's like, how do you define the standard transaction that says, I don't care, Mr. Architect, how you go about doing it? I mean, it's kind of the idea of an IFC, but that's not working. We got to figure out that concept of, it doesn't matter which way you get to this transaction point. That's what this center point of this common data environment, if you're in the UK or whatever you want to call it, is. And the team has to agree that everybody's going to play by that rule and build it within their system. And then there has to be, in my opinion, a third-party entity that now almost enforces that credibility. I mean, the same way the new role of the superintendent is to enable all the foreman and last planner to empower themselves. And some of them don't have the culture to be able to change that. Teams don't have the ability to change that mentality. So you need a new role that sort of plays the checks and balances and actually manages that single source of truth, but doesn't actually develop anything. Mm-hmm. And even, I don't even think that integrator would enforce. All they would do is observe and report. And if nobody on the team cares about the pull reports, nothing happens. And it's actually almost just letting, because if they don't change their behavior, it's on them. And anything going back to the data would prove that it wasn't the technology's fault. It wasn't the contract's fault. It was the frickin' culture and behavior's fault. But sometimes it wasn't the culture and behavior, and it was the contract or it was the technology. So until we can diagnose in those 3 angles where that breakdown happened, we can't begin to understand how to fix it.
I think it's important to determine, whether it's your 10 parameters or your 15 parameters, what are they? Why are we using them? And educate why they're there. And for example, like Ivan was saying, when we create an implementation plan for our owners that they push out to the rest of the AEC team, we give them a template file. to the architect to start the process. And in the implementation plan, we show them and educate them why they have to fill in these fields, what the implementations are downstream for filling in those fields, and that then the contractor can add another 65 layers of data to the 2 or 3 that they started. But it's an education process. Now, I do have a lot of people that go, I don't need that much education, but if you don't understand why you're doing this at the beginning and what it's attached to and what it's leading to, once you give that education, it's a lot easier. And then that way it's seamlessly going from one to the other. But once again, that's my selfish need of what data I need to get data that the owner is, which is different from what, the data.
But at least you're transparent about your bias, and half the problem is you got too many GCs that think they have the bias of the owner, because that's really, they're just overselling and under delivering and giving the same lip service, but really they don't care either. So it sets the whole thing up for failure. So it's almost like, how can each biased architect, contractor, engineer, owner say, this is actually what I care about? But a lot of them don't know what they actually care about.
Well, what we've seen is actually some of the stuff that we've done is actually been more beneficial to the contractor in the process, because it's creating a common language between assets on a project, and an owner, a contractor, and an architect can then talk about those assets on a more common language for that owner, and then they can more easily attach information that they would already be using on a project, plus the additional information that this that's feeding into another system.
Yeah,
that's
right.
No,
that's exactly what we're working
as we go through as Chris is skimming through what's in COSA, we'll skim through what's in some of the back end and just say, if these are the 10 things that can stay consistent, just do these things in those 10 boxes, and that covers all these other standards. I mean, that's the idea. Absolutely.
By AU, which is now, you should, what I'll be doing is posting on our LinkedIn group and forums what I've collected from different meetings, different standards that already exist of metadata for documents. And that's where we're going to start. We feel like if we can get there and then we can get buy-in and people actually using it, then we can step up and go to some of the other places.
And I think that's very important, because even James has mentioned on y'all's podcast that in looking at COSA, a date is not just a date.
Right.
There is how that date is configured and how that date goes from one source to the next source in the process, which is very important to think about as well.
So I think there's a really important consideration. I love the idea of a metadata standard, but one of the things that I've learned over the last 8 years of working with owners is I listen to all the presentations that they talk about how the owners aren't engaged. Well, that's our fault, because we don't engage the owners. And what I mean when I say we don't engage the owners is we don't engage the owners with a business plan and an opportunity that makes sense to them. Most of the owners that I work with in higher ed and healthcare are fairly sophisticated document management systems. You truly want to create a document data standard and have it set action. We need to find out what the owners' organizations are using to ultimately receive the turnover documentation from us. Talk to those vendors. We're talking about like Rochelle and Meridian and a lot of the other vendors in that space. Understand and get them involved in the process, because I always live by the golden rule, and that is he who holds the goal gets to make the rules. So if we go to the owner who ultimately holds the goal and creates a business value for them, and we have them go to their vendors that they work with and integrate, now you have support for your metadata standards. Now you've created an end-to-end workflow where it benefits all of us in the design and construction process, but it ultimately benefits that final consumer the most, because if we can create the business value for him, now we have the opportunity, right? It's going to cost some money to do this. Now we have the opportunity to create a business value where these people who ultimately have the money in this process are willing to contribute to solve.
So this is a question I have. So this is metadata that you're attaching to PDF.
It could be a PDF for any document for that, but that's our initial step. You know, since we are rooted in the
And so, and it's literally down to, sheet name, author, like what probably like location on the project based on some. I mean, what would be in that top 10? I'm sort of curious. You know, like what are the most important things? I mean,
Well, some of them already exist. Like there's 5, I think, in the ISO standard.
they're like the basic ones that none of which ever get filled out. By the way.
So that's half of the education, right? Is letting people know that they actually exist and they can be used. It's efficient, but yeah, it's going to be title, document type, sheet number.
Yeah, because document type, we have had some interesting discussions around the difference between, say, a specification, document PDF versus a PNID vector, but not necessarily location accurate, vector geometry, and then a true floor plan or elevation drawing. And the differences in the requirements for what make them acceptable. There's gonna be a lot more requirements for a floor plan drawing around grid line alignment and all this. It gets way detailed, whereas there's still some just basic stuff within a spec that's like, can I search through this spec and find information on the fly that's not even in there? So it's important to separate those two and not lump it all together.
So there are 6 in the ISO standard: title, author, subject, project, revisor, and client. Those are in basically every PDF that you ever wrote.
And if we're ever going to get to a truly sort of like digital signature, digital approval, like it's interesting depending on your jurisdiction, depending on what those standards are of what's acceptable, where you can stamp something as an engineer, and anytime someone puts any sort of a markup on it, it sort of triggers that it's now in a question mark, and you now need to go back to it to say, yeah, I'm okay with that. Check it back that you've reviewed it, and to not have to go out into a PROC or out into a CMSC or whatever. It may still answer that because somebody wants it in that database, but you sure as hell don't want to go out to that database. You want to stay right there and do it. And so I think having this common, even just reviewer, that could be a very important category of who is the name officially that goes into that, is in the reviewer at that given time for, is a drawing in flux or whatever, approved or not approved in a current state, and really be jumping back and forth of compliant, non-compliant essentially. And because otherwise you just would dealing with 2 weeks to get an updated drawing and the old school slip sheeting process. Like, that's a broken process. All we've done is electronicify whatever a broken process. Like, we could redefine it. But the big one is digital signatures, where it's been interesting talking to these open permit guys, and where they're trying to take it where even jurisdictions would be using this sort of stuff and making sure they have the appropriate amount of security and not too much security.
What's Mecklenburg County using? They're doing all digital permits. That's now.
Not all of them. But yeah.
CHS, they're doing digital submissions.
Yeah,
The biggest challenge
would be able PDF, but that's not all submissions. Okay. That's a special class. But yeah.
One of the biggest challenges with the digital submissions is the signature, and what the state board and agencies of architects and engineers, professional boards, are accepting. Some states are very lax on it and basically will accept any representation of a signature. Some boards have very defined processes, like state of Florida, which is where I am. You actually have to use a digital signature and certify the file with a, with an approved software.
Yeah.
If the conversation of digital signatures is interesting, how the regulations is working through all that, because we know Mecklenburg County, I'm sure she'd be happy to present to the group and struggling with.
And so yeah, actually the very last slide, because we do need to wrap things up and folks have to go, although some of us will stick around and talk, is that every Friday we do an update call and we record it and put it on YouTube for everyone. And so that would be an awesome one to have her perspective, what they're trying to do, where their problems are. Awesome.
Because they've had to get into security issues and licensure issues and all of this good stuff.
We've got some similar conversations with the city of and what their issues are.
Her big pushback was the MEP engineers as it's crossed the boundary line within the professional engineering definition within North Carolina.
Gotcha.
I think they've worked through that now.
Awesome. Well, good. Well, thank you guys all so much for participating. Again, if you're not connected through any of the emails and stuff, definitely give me a card. We'll get you into the system. And hopefully anyone at AU, we'll see you at AU and on our Friday calls as well. Welcome to join on. So thank you guys so much for taking the time. Thanks, everyone on the phone.
Thanks, Nate.
Thanks, Brianna.
Yeah. Yeah. Not that you're not trying to. It's just.